So, with the new generation of the Xbox consoles, one of the great things that I think Microsoft has done is they've lowered the barrier of entrance for their console. And what I mean by that is, it's not like the previous generations where when the Xbox One came out, that was really the only option you had and you paid either full price or you didn't. They've went ahead and they've released the Series S and the Series X, and of course there's a big price difference between the two consoles. Now, the only downside to this is if you're in the market for the newest Xbox, it may result in you having a bit of decision crisis where which one really is best suited for your needs. So in this video, I'm going to go over the differences between both of them and really who I think the Series S and the Series X are really designed for. So I'm going to go break that down just after this. Perfect. So when looking at these consoles, the first thing I want to bring up is, if you've watched my other reviews on both the Series S and the Series X, there's pretty much feature-wise, as far as Game Pass, as far as the operating systems, as far as everything goes there, they're identical between both systems. So really the main thing I'm going to focus on in this video are three things: the size of the console, the storage capability of the consoles, and lastly, the graphics and output for these consoles. So, to start, the reason I'm bringing up size is there is definitely a significant size difference on the Series S versus the Series X. Like, just looking at them side by side here, it's clear that the Series X looks like a giant toaster or something in comparison. The reason I think this is applicable is I know that I'm on a bunch of Xbox groups on Facebook, and I've even seen on YouTube people who use their Series S remotely, so they bring it on things like road trips or family trips and stuff like that. I've even seen some people go ahead and buy the portable monitor that you can attach to it. I'm actually in the process of ordering a portable monitor that sits in the back of my truck for this very reason, and I'll most likely review that sometime later. But the reason I'm bringing that up is, as far as being able to bring this with you places or set it up elsewhere, it's really small, it's really efficient that way. And this is, in my opinion, where the Series S, if you're someone who's constantly finding yourself gaming on the go, or if you're like me and you work a lot and sometimes that means working or staying overnight somewhere, having a console like this, there may be benefit to some people for it being so small and thus more portable than the Series X. Which, if you're someone who's basically keeping their gaming setup mostly static, this probably doesn't matter. But if you're someone who is on the go a lot and brings your console places a lot, the Series S definitely edges out the X here. Now, moving on to the next thing, and that's storage. So, the very biggest criticism I'd say I have of the Series S is that it only comes with 512 gigabytes of storage, and I believe only like just shy of 400 gigabytes of that is even accessible to you when you purchase the console. The others like used for operating system and stuff. And then the Series X, you get 1 terabyte out of the box. The reason this is applicable is to expand the storage with one of the expansion cards is pretty pricey. Now, I know that you can get the Seagate expansion card on sale sometimes for the 512 version anyways, around $150 Canadian, but when you pair that with the cost of the console, I believe you're only about $150 or so off of just getting the Series X, if we're counting that, you know, the storage card and the Series S are both on sale at the time of purchase. So that's definitely a consideration for a lot of people, and that was one of the things I brought up in both my review of the expansion card and my review of the Series S. So that is a bit of a downside. Now keep in mind, my son, he only plays a handful of different games, so it's not as big of a deal for someone like my son who really is using it as a Fortnite machine. But if you're someone like me who's constantly getting new games, constantly downloading new games from Game Pass, that space fills up very quick. And not to mention, even on the Series X, that 1 terabyte almost doesn't even feel like it's enough. But it's manageable considering that I have at least 800 or so gigabytes available to me when I start the console up, when I first got it. So As far as storage goes, this is something that you definitely need to consider if you're purchasing either the Series S or the Series X. And you also have to really consider what games are you going to be typically playing. Because if you're a Call of Duty guy, you're a Halo guy, those games start to add up very quick on your hard drive. So before purchasing this console or purchasing the Series S or the X, certainly check out what your storage needs are going to be. And if you don't particularly feel like the X is what you need, definitely try to be strategic about your purchasing and get that Seagate expansion card on sale at very least, or when it goes on sale, to try to kind of ease some of the pain of that cost there, because that's definitely a consideration you need to make between these two consoles, and probably one of the starkest differences at first of these consoles. Now, the last thing, and probably the hottest debated topic when it comes to the Series S versus the Series X, really is the graphics. Now, if you've watched my individual reviews, I kind of break this down a little deeper, but the simplest way I'm going to define this, and probably this is going to be the main defining point between whether you purchase the Series S or the Series X, is do you have a 4K display and is playing games in the best possible way? So what I mean by that is better textures, shadows, all that fun stuff. Is that your main motivation for having the new Xbox? If that's your answer, then the Series X 100% is the console you want to go with. But something I want to bring up, a lot of those graphical differences and the increases in texture fidelity and shadow effects and all that fun stuff, they get kind of mitigated on the Series S by the fact that it's only really ever outputting 1080. So when you're playing on a display that doesn't display as high of a resolution, it almost makes sense that the Series S isn't as powerful. Because what I mean is, when my son's playing on a 1080p display and I'm playing on my 4K display, for me to be able to tell the difference in visuals is very hard. The only way I was able to is when I hooked my Series S up to one of the 4K displays in our house, and I noticed that it didn't look as good as it could have been. But then again, because the resolution wasn't as sharp, I couldn't really tell as well as I should have been able to. So what I mean is, the 4K ability of the Series X almost makes having that extra graphical or graphic power or processing more necessary, because some of the deficits in visuals are way more noticeable. Like when I play Call of Duty side by side, I really and truly can't tell the difference between the Series S or the Series X. Now, that difference only really becomes more pronounced if you're hooking that Series S up to a 4K display and running it at 1080p only, which really is all it can output for most games. Some games can do 4K. So ultimately, the biggest consideration I would have if I was doing this all over again and didn't have both really would be, am I gaming on a 4K display? And is that very important to me to be playing everything in a 4K resolution? If I'm not, if I'm playing on like on a 1080p display and I don't really have any intentions of changing that, the Series S 110% meets most of the things that I would need out of a console. Granted, you're good with the 512 gigabytes of storage or upgrading that storage. So ultimately, I hope this video is helpful in being able to determine which one's right for you. I think that the display, the storage, and the size are all probably the main factors that me, myself, if I was doing this all over again, would be considering. And it's one of the things I hear a lot on these different groups that I'm a part of on Facebook and that I see on YouTube. So ultimately, really, they're both phenomenal consoles. I have good things to say about both of them. They're both not without flaws, but I really like that Microsoft has given tiered choicing to people when it comes to their new consoles. And ultimately, granted you have a place for either a 4K or 1080p display, you definitely have a place for one of these consoles depending on what you choose.